Welcome to the Rankings Podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and elite personal injury attorneys and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Chris Stryer here, CEO and founder of Rankings.io, where we help elite personal injury attorneys dominate first page rankings. You're listening to the Rankings Podcast, where I feature top business owners, entrepreneurs, and elite personal injury attorneys. Speaking of elite personal injury attorneys, I have Neama Rahmani on the show today. Neama is the president and co-founder of West Coast Trial Lawyers, a premier Los Angeles personal injury law firm. Neama graduated from UCLA at the age of 19 and Harvard Law School at the age of 22, making him one of the youngest graduates in a 200-year history for the law school. Over the course of his career, he has handled thousands of cases and has helped his clients obtain more than $1 billion in settlements and judgments. Neama, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. I'm really excited to speak with you. So we have to jump right in. We have to talk about graduating Harvard at the age of 22. You know, what drove you to accomplish this feat at such a young age?
So I was a super nerd growing up. I still am. I like to nerd out about the law. I like to nerd out about SEO, as you know. When I was a kid, I skipped some grades. So I was able to graduate high school early at 16. I went into college, took a lot of APs. So I started as a junior, even though I was taking a minimum caseload, graduated in 3 years, went straight to law school. So, started law school at 19, finished at 22. And, I was working for big firms. At the age of 20, I was at Gibson Dunn and then O'Melveny & Myers, some of these big corporate firms. And that's where I got my start.
Yeah. So did you know just right away, hey, I'm going to be an attorney. This is my path, and just kind of pursued it?
Yeah. From a young age, my grandfather was a judge. I knew I was going to be an attorney, prosecutor, judge. Didn't work out that way, at least for the last part. So it's something I always wanted to do. I love being in a courtroom, even as a child. I was one of those guys with the sign. I'll debate you about anything. I was one of those crazy people. So it's something that was always planned, and it ended up kind of working out for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you just had your eye on the prize. You knew exactly where you're going. So you could take really intentional actions on everything that you were learning and hearing and just, being surrounded by all of that. So, after you graduated, you worked for O'Melveny & Myers, a large law firm right out of law school. So what was it like to jump right into the fire and represent clients, like Disney and Marriott and these other huge organizations?
Yeah, a completely different animal, right? So right now we're representing ordinary people. Oftentimes the first time they've ever even talked to a lawyer, right? They're scared. Mm-hmm. There's a real sort of emotional component there. One of these big, huge corporate firms, entirely different. You're dealing with a general counsel, deputy GC of a company, really sort of sophisticated clients, entirely different calculus for them. It's different, right? We're representing some of the biggest corporations in the world. They had been clients of the firm for 50, 100 years, some of them. And instead of having thousands of cases like we do now, I would work on only 4 or 5 cases at a time, really huge multi-million or multi-billion dollar litigation. So it was good to kind of cut my teeth on those massive cases, even though I was handling just one aspect as part of a team instead of handling everything like we do now on, just a smaller case involving an individual. So it was a great experience, but, it just wasn't for me. I didn't like doing the defense work, defending those companies. One of the reasons I left the firm, it was challenging. We were hired to represent the Catholic Church in the sex abuse cases, not the individual priests, but the church. And, when that happened, I just knew it was my time to go. It's not why I went to law school or what I wanted to do.
So let's talk about that, where you formed, you're the co-founder of West Coast Trial Lawyers. So when you kind of came to this clarity that, hey, this isn't for me, I want to go on the other side. I want to go on the plaintiff's side. I want to help these injured victims. Was it just, oh, I'm done? Was there a planning aspect? How did you go about informing West Coast Trial Lawyers?
So I got to give credit to my partner, Alan. So he's the one that really pushed me to do it. I got to give a little bit of the backstory. So once I left O'Melveny, well, let me start why I joined O'Melveny. So I worked at Gibson Dunn my first summer. My second summer I was deciding between Latham and Watkins, O'Melveny and Myers. Those were at the time, really considered the three huge corporate law firms in LA. They called them the big three. Alan, my partner, recruited me to O'Melveny. So he was a young associate at the time. He left some years later to start his own firm. And he did everything, but ultimately developed a pretty successful plaintiff's practice. I went in and I became a prosecutor. I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And then was prosecuting public corruption cases in the city of LA. And I was being vetted for a judgeship. That was always the plan. I wanted to be a judge, and I was well on my way. Well, a couple of things happened. I had two kids back to back, and my wife, who's an attorney for foster kids, and I were working for the government at the time, and we were broke. We just couldn't afford to both work as government attorneys. So we had just a come to Jesus talk, and she sat down and she said, one of us needs to get a real job and go back to the private sector. And that one of us was me. So I almost went back to the firm as a, kind of junior non-equity partner to maybe generate a book of business to see how that went. But Alan, at the time, he had separated from his partner for a number of reasons. His partner wanted to do billable cases. Alan wanted to only do plaintiff's work. So Alan approached me. He said, look, let's start a new firm. Let's do plaintiff's work. Let's do personal injury. My initial reaction was absolutely not. I'm not going to be that guy on a billboard or a bus bench. That's just not me. He said, no, you're really going to like it. I'm like, why would I like it? He's like, you are going to help people. You're going to go after the bad guy. This is the closest thing to being a prosecutor and actually getting paid. And it kind of sold me on this vision of this different higher end personal injury practice. And I got to give him credit. It took him a while, but I'm glad he did. And I'm very happy with what we've accomplished so far.
What were it like during those early days? Did Alan already have like a good stream of business from his marketing efforts, or was it both of you really hustling to bring in the cases? Or was it, just the reputation and you had those referrals? What was it like in those early days?
Once we started, Alan's former partner had bought him out. So we didn't have anything in terms of cases. And when we sat down to come up with a business plan, and I knew all the folks in town that were doing radio and TV and billboards and so forth. They'd been doing it for years and the market was saturated. And I said, look, how can we compete with these guys? They have a 10, 20-year head start. So we decided to go in a completely different direction, which was digital. So when we started, and this was back in 2014, we made a commitment. We are only going to do digital advertising, whether it's obviously Google, whether it's organic, whether it's paid, Yelp, Bing, Yahoo, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, there's Snapchat. There's no digital platform that we do not advertise on. So that's why we went in that direction. It was a newer, more emerging market. And we decided to focus all our efforts on there. So in the beginning, it was challenging, as you know, trying to rank a site, especially in a location and demographic really as competitive as LA. So it took a while. It took about 2 years for us to really kind of hit our stride. And, I'm glad we and made those efforts and investing, because now they're starting to pay off.
Yeah, and I think you had the foresight to kind of see where the future was going. Everyone's got right in arm's length their mobile device, and now it's probably just compounding because you're one of those first adopters. And I've seen your Yelp reviews. I don't know how many you have right now, but it's more than any other firm that I'm aware of. And so
yeah,
you guys,
it's been a benefit for us. It's good and bad. I love Yelp, and those Yelp reviews are very helpful, but we need to provide a sort of different level of service. We overstaff our cases in terms of attorneys and non-attorneys, because you can't write a bad review for a TV ad or a billboard, but you certainly can for someone that you found online. So we need to make sure that we provide amazing service. Otherwise, that's going to affect our business going forward.
So is that still the focus today, or are you starting to experiment with some of those traditional forms of advertising, billboards, radio, or is it still just really laser focused on digital?
laser focused, 100% digital. And obviously, things have changed over time. As you know, Yelp used to rank organically number one, right? And that's sort of fallen off. So it's shifted within the digital world as things have changed. Obviously, as you mentioned, everything's going mobile now. I think when we started, it was 70-30 or maybe more, in favor of desktop. Obviously, that's changed. It's still all digital. We're just tweaking it within the digital world.
So you've started to generate business, and it starts to take off. And let's kind of flip it on the other end. So very few successful business owners get to where they are without making a few mistakes. Are there any mistakes that come to mind that now you look back and those were great learning experiences?
Yeah, I mean, we've made lots of mistakes. We've invested in different digital mediums that just really haven't worked out. I can kind of get into some of that, but when it comes to personal injury, you really want to be that first call, right? Because if you're unlike e-commerce, right? If you're the fifth business that someone calls, but you close the sale, you close the sale. You're the fifth law firm someone calls. That's the case that's been rejected by 4 other firms. So, we've learned that not all calls are created equal, not all leads are created equal, and to kind of focus on the quality and being that initial call. It's really important as opposed to chasing, recycled leads.
Yeah. And I think there's from my conversations, there's a lot of different ways you can run a practice. You can run, super high volume where it's a lot of pre-lit stuff, or you're trying cases. And I think there's different ways to approach it. And, I think you can do it a number of ways.
So what we're doing, we do both. There are those pre-lit firms that, are marketing machines, and they try to settle all their cases, and what they can't, they might do some soft litigation. If not, they'll send it out to the litigation firms, and those litigation firms are marketing to the pre-litigation firm. We're doing both. We keep everything in-house. We're a couple blocks from the courthouse here in LA. For better or worse, it's worked for us and our clients. We don't want to be sending them off to other firms and relying on those other firms to service them. That might affect, both the results and the client satisfaction. So we end up keeping everything in-house.
I think that's really smart, because then you can turn those clients that have a great experience into an evangelist, and certainly know how powerful reviews are for local SEO, just for SEO in general, and social proof for conversions.
Absolutely. I mean, it's key, right? When folks are choosing, especially a personal injury firm, that consideration period is so low. I like to compare it to medicine, right? If it's, someone wants to get Botox or some sort of plastic surgery, they kind of think about it. It might take days or weeks or even longer before they decide to do it, right? Or hair restoration, whatever the case may be. But if you're an orthopedic trauma surgeon doing rotator cuff surgery, no one's thinking about that. No one's thinking about ever needing a personal injury. When you need that service, you're going to make a decision within 24 hours, maybe 48 hours. So it's a very quick emotional decision. You need a lawyer like yesterday. So that social proof is very powerful when you're deciding between different firms.
I couldn't agree more. And also that social proof, when you have a high review rating, that's when you can rank for those superlatives, top attorney, best attorney. If you have a low review rating, you're not going to show up. Just like if you went on vacation to eat at a restaurant, you type best restaurants near me, you wouldn't see the 1s and 2s or the restaurants with low amount of reviews. I kind of want to stick here. You led me right into it. So in terms of the social proof, your firm's worked with a lot of celebrities. You've got celebrity endorsements from Carmen Electra, John Manziel. So how have those impacted the firm? Or by congregating with these types of individuals, does it kind of draw in other celebrities to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get different celebrities that'll call us. We don't do any transactional work. So, I'm not negotiating deals or writing agreements, but, I have a lot of litigation experience. So once a celebrity is involved in litigation, we'll take those cases. It'll be a one-off. It might not necessarily be a personal injury or employment case. One, obviously I want to help them out. These are people that I know. But two, it really does sort of resonate with others. And people that are considering us, they'll say, okay, well, this guy's been on the news. He's been on CNN. He's represented these clients. And it helps on that conversion rate with folks that are trying to make a decision between firms, and they really don't have a whole lot of information to distinguish us between someone else.
You know, and I've caught myself on your guys' social media because of that. So particularly on Instagram, I see where you're commenting on cases in the news, like I can't think of her name, but the individual that's on the Full House college
Oh
scandal.
yeah, Lori Loughlin. Yeah. So,
Yep.
you know, criminal is always the most interesting for the public. And reporters, they like me because I'm one of the few former prosecutors that doesn't do any criminal defense work. So oftentimes, criminal defense attorneys, they're conflicted off, or they're hesitant to say something because it might affect their ability to retain business if it's a pending case. But because I'm not chasing after the Lori Loughlin's of the world, I'm always happy to talk about those cases. They are interesting, and it keeps me still involved and relevant in the criminal world. I don't like defense work because I don't like being in a defensive position. I'm an aggressive guy. I like being an offense. So it helps me at least hang on to a little bit of my former life as a prosecutor.
So one of the things that's very smart. And that's I haven't heard that approach, and that's very smart. And I know your SEO team loves you because when you get these quotes in these big publications, that just helps, you know, those great backlinks from the quotes they're looking for. I'm sure that's really beneficial.
Well, it's tough as a personal injury attorney, right? How many cases are you going to have that are really going to get, you know, local or national media attention, right? It can be this horrible catastrophic injury, right? A death case or a paralysis case, amputation case. It's just, you know, those are very sad cases, but they just don't attract the type of media attention that, you know, someone getting arrested does. It's just the reality of the situation. So,
yeah, that makes sense. So shifting kind of away from marketing, more to like HR. So getting to where your firm's at now, you don't grow to be the size you are and have the success you are without a great team. So I like to ask this question, you know, so what's the best way that you find and retain elite talent?
yeah, what we do is I like to give our attorneys, you know, a piece of the action. When it comes to the law, there's two primary ways to make money. The first is your typical law firm model, the billable model, a leverage model, where the partners bill out the associates out at X dollars an hour, they pay them Y, and the partners keep the difference, right? The money flows upward. That's typically how attorneys make money. The other way is contingency, right? Where you handle a case, you take the risk as the attorney or the law firm, and when you win, hopefully you win, you get the rewards of the risk that you took. So what we do at our firm is we give our attorneys a piece of all the attorney's fees. So to the extent that we do well, they benefit. So we've had a lot of attorneys that have come in, they've embraced this risk, they have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial mindset. They don't mind taking maybe a little bit of a lower base salary in exchange for this reward. So that model has been pretty successful for us and has allowed us to both attract and retain really amazing attorneys.
There are so many nuggets here that I want to dive into. So first, you've got basically three pricing models: input, output, and value. So inputs like hours and capacity, that puts the most amount of risk on the consumer to get the result, least amount of risk on the person billing. And then you've got contingency, that puts the least amount of risk on the consumer and the most amount of risk on the attorney, because they don't get paid unless they win.
Sure.
And it's interesting because I love the tying the cases into your team, because everyone says they want someone with ownership mentality and to be empowered. Do you find that gives them this empowerment, this sense of ownership mentality to really give it their all, and it's not just a 9-to-5 type of situation?
Absolutely. I mean, they have a vested interest in the case, not just, you know, in terms of some bonus they may receive at the end of the year or some discretionary, you know, reward that they get if they reach certain thresholds or numbers like some other firms do. They get a piece of every single case. Now, I can tell you it's not for everyone. It does give some folks anxiety because lawyers by nature are risk averse. And to have a position like this where, you know, a significant portion of your compensation is based on performance, it's not for everyone. But for those that, come in and they jump in and they do well, they're rewarded. And I think they should be.
I want to ask one more question on a follow-up on this, because this is so interesting to me. This is the first time I've heard where it's kind of all tied in. Normally it's normally just the partners or the equity, that's getting the equity. Do you find that doing this, and I'm kind of asking this for self purposes, right? Do I tie in the benefit of our business, into a profit share like this? So do you find that by doing this, some of the non-performers are kind of weeded out by the people that are performing? That there's a little pressure?
I think so. Again, some firms, you are profitable just by having a JD and a law license and showing up. You're billable, right? That's just not how it is at our firm. You're only profitable if you can perform and if you can settle or win cases. So for those attorneys that might not be as aggressive, might be very smart, but they're more sort of behind the scenes, law in motion types, it's just not for them. So it does weed out attorneys that can't move files and move cases, number one. The only sort of challenge that we sometimes do have to work with is, obviously, because so much of the compensation is based on the cases themselves, we want to make sure that there's a fair distribution of cases amongst attorneys. And one attorney isn't getting, the higher value cases while the other ones aren't. So it can be a challenge to distribute cases in a fair and equitable manner. But other than that, once you get a fair distribution, everyone's starting at the same place in terms of, approximate case value and so forth. It ends up working very well for us.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and we don't have to talk about them right now, but I'm sure you've had some of those retrospectives conversations that were just like, oh man, we should have went a different direction here with the distribution.
Oh, absolutely. In terms of case value, I mean, things can swing dramatically, whether it's a piece of evidence or a witness or, insurance coverage. I mean, any number of things can dramatically affect the value of the case. So, you make the best judgment that you can at the time in terms of case value, but you need to sort of be willing to, it's like poker, right? You kind of get your first two cards and hold them. Then, you get the flop and things can change and, you got to adjust. Sometimes you want to push forward very aggressively. Sometimes, it ends up not being as good of a case as you thought. You need to withdraw entirely. So
you're speaking my language at the poker. I was a big full tilt player before they seized all the money there.
Nice. Yeah. Alan, my partner, has placed in the World Series a number of times from an SEO perspective. When we started, we had to kind of, not to say that's not a big accomplishment, but we wanted to rank him. We had to get all those sort of cardplayer.com and everything kind of work its way down. And
that's funny. I'm going to have to look up Alan after this, actually, because I've got a lot of friends who do that. So let's shift back to your personal development. So, education there, very focused. Are there any books that have helped develop your progress? Or are there any books that come to mind that you like to recommend in terms of personal development and also just coaches and mentors?
I can't think of anything in particular that, I've read a lot of books, but nothing that I would recommend. One thing I would say, and not to say it was a mistake, but I got into this business after I've been practicing for about 12 years or so. I didn't start out of law school. So my advice is if you're going to jump into anything, whether it's your own firm or a small firm, just to do so a little bit earlier in your career. For me, the challenge was, making this decision after I had two small kids. And it was just very challenging those first couple of years, trying to raise kids and start a new business. So don't wait for your hand to be forced. Do it earlier, because the sooner you do it, you're going to reap those benefits. The other thing I would say is, at least with respect to personal injury, if you want to do it and you want to do it well, not necessarily books, but you really need to understand medicine. It's where law and medicine intersect. So I spend a lot of time with doctors, more than you could possibly imagine, because I've tried a lot of cases. I've represented a lot of clients, but I did not understand medicine until I really started doing this. So if I spend any time learning, it's learning from doctors right now. that's been the one takeaway.
I think it's an incredible takeaway because not only do you form a relationship with these individuals, it's also, you can understand where there's potential value that may have been overlooked.
Absolutely. And, I want to be able to describe, how my client suffered and his or her injuries to a jury. And unless I understand the human body and the mechanism and causation and how a bone can break and how it can be repaired and those types of things, I'll never be able to really convey that to a jury and a judge. So that's important. That's something I would, tell everyone to at least plan on doing if you're going to travel down this path.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then you appear more trustworthy because you have expertise on the topic, and it allows them to just trust you even more. Neama, so one final question here. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't discussed?
No, I mean, I got to tell you that you are, the best. It's always great talking to you when it comes to this field. The fact that you and the firms that you work with have been so successful in the most competitive area by far in the country or maybe even the world when it comes to Google rankings and everything. So, I tip my hat to you, Chris. It's great always talking to you, and I appreciate everything you do for you and your clients.
Neama, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. Guys, we've been talking to Neama, elite personal injury attorney of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Neama, where can people go to learn more?
Check us out. Our website, hopefully it ranks well, www.westcoasttriallawyers.com. West Coast Trial Lawyers, plural.
Thanks so much.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Rankings Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.